I live in Dedridge, and if anybody drives through the town, they will see a row of little red brick cottages, a bit like Coronation Street. That's where I live. There's 3 blocks in the street that I live in, and there's 27 houses in total. So you can imagine everybody knows everybody else in our community. I was born in Dedridge in 1959. My parents moved into our house in 1957, the year they got married. And my dad was a miner. He was a miner at the Burn Grange mine in West Calder, and there was a big disaster there years ago. There's a big monument in West Calder. So we're all from the West Lothian area, or Mid Lothian as it was called then. I can't remember much of my dad being a miner because he was younger when he was doing the mining, but he got the house because he was a miner. We had nothing. We had a little front room in one of the houses as a shop, and we had to get deliveries from the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, and we still have the same ice cream man that I had as a child, and it's his son that comes from West Calder down to us on a Friday afternoon, and Gillespie is well known in West Lothian, not just where I live, but that's the day that they come to our house. So he too has seen the generations growing up. You know, like as I was saying, my niece, when she was young, she would go out and get a cone, and now it's her daughters that are going out and getting the cone. And obviously the guy that works on the ice cream van was a boy who's grown up into, it's his business now, but he's still coming around the small streets because that's where he made his money years gone by, and he's keeping the communities going. And you see things on Facebook, where's Gillespie going to be today? So that people can follow. When Livingston came along, my youngest sister went to Dedridge Primary, and at the primary school there is a community wing, and in the days gone by, they had activities to bring the community together. I remember them having carry-on films, things that would bring families in to watch together. For me, as I say, having no activities or places to go when you were born in just one street, suddenly having a community wing, and now we have the Lanthorn Community Centre, we've got Crofthead Farm, and we still have the community wing in Dedridge. For me, that gives plenty of opportunities for people to get involved. There's something for everybody in Livingston. You just have to find the niche that you want to go into. And that's the sort of side for me, but that's not to say it's for everybody.
It was the 60s, the swinging 60s, which was a good time to be alive in. And I was reading the paper and I saw this advert looking for a typist, shorthand typist, in this new town, Livingston Development Corporation. I applied, sat the test, and was employed. I was the 15th person to be employed. We went to Edinburgh to the Scotsman offices, as the offices in Livingston weren't built at that time. Well, the population was growing at that time, and I think that was when it was decided to have a new town because there was more people, so we needed more houses. And of course we were getting to the stage in the 60s, we were away from the 50s, where after the war you didn't have that much. So they had all these plans about shops and different things, cinemas, swimming pool, and it was just so lovely. It was grand. It was something you'd never thought of. It was different type of houses than what we had lived in, although there were still council houses. I myself had a house in Deans South, and it was absolutely wonderful. It had so many cupboards, it had a fitted kitchen, it had a huge big window in your lounge. It was just amazing. LDC stands for Livingston Development Corporation. At that time, we weren't quite sure what it was. But they made a master plan which we could go and look at. It was in one of the rooms and it was quite big, and it showed all the houses in different parts, where they were going to be, where the trees would be, where the swimming pool would be, where the shops would be. It was just amazing, and we couldn't believe that this was going to happen. And they did develop. They did do what the master plan showed us. What they had in their minds came to fruition. It really did. A lot of those people probably are not with us now. So really it's the generation of me, I suppose, because I was young at the time. We remember it. We remember it as something, wow. Whereas the children nowadays, they've been brought up with Livingston Development Corporation. They're used to it. They've never seen what was there before. But that's life.
My name is Alan Morris. I was born in Livingston Station in 1961. My mum, she was from Livingston Station. She stayed then in Burns Now with her mum, dad. My grandfather, he was a miner in the shale pits. The ladies from Livingston Station in the middle 50s, late 50s, in the middle 50s, they would get on a bus at the Livingston Road End, which is the A89, and they would go to Rosyth or South Queensferry, and they would meet the sailors there. It was normally at the weekends, Fridays and Saturday nights, and they would sing and dance and have a good time. My mum met my dad, and they got married, and eventually I was born in 1961. People were saying when I was a little boy, they were always afraid of this new building coming in, the new Glen Road coming in, with all these more houses coming in, and they were afraid that the people who were going to come in, that we wouldn't be able to lock our doors anymore. Eventually we all got on great, and we did, and we still do, because we got to diverse. But I think the locals at the time were afraid that they couldn't leave their front door open anymore because these foreigners were coming in from Glasgow. I remember the school getting built. That's Dean's Primary School. I remember that getting built because we were in the play park at the time, and this big lorry went past, and it looked like a rocket on the trailer, and that was the chimney for Dean's Primary School. And I remember that passing on the big lorry, and I thought it was a big rocket. And you've got to remember, I was only 7 or 8 years old. And then we got moved out of the old school, and we got moved into New Dean's Primary School. I've always got my memories of Livingston Station. It hurts me to see the house builders still building on the more old fields in the green area. That hurts me a bit. But I believe that people have got to live somewhere, but I'm missing the old fields just starting to disappear now. The fields where the farmers used to have their cows and their crops, and and I stay in one of those fields now where my house got built, so I've moved slightly just out a little bit. But no, it's good that they've got Aileyburn Park and the reservoir down there, and it's still that'll always be there now, so that's good.
Hi, my name's William Fleming. I worked as a contractor, mainly cutting trees, seeding, things like that, grass seeding, any paving works in Livingston. I've always had an interest in photography. I made a point of always carrying a camera. I've done that since I was very young. And it's, as you saw work developing, it was interesting to document it, different stages, things like that. I started way back, must be the late 60s, somewhere about there. I actually moved to Livingston in 1980 and stayed for 30 years. I always thought it was well laid out with the Livingston Road. That was termed as a spine road, with the junctions and the slip roads radiating from that. Livingston had a really good network of underpasses and paths right across the town. It was the main roads that seemed to be trouble. Anybody coming into Livingston, as I mentioned, I worked on a lot of the main roads, and somebody would stop if you were doing landscaping work. And the funny thing is, the first question I would ask is, how do I get out of here? That was a problem at the start. That was just one of these things. The Livingston Development Corporation at the time, as I say, it was well planned. But one thing I didn't agree with at the time was, the Five Sisters, the Westwood Bings, to the west there. LDC wanted to blitz them, level them. They didn't think it was in keeping with the town's image. Now that would have been a terrible mistake at that time, because they're very popular, a great attraction. Shale is oil-based, and it was used for lamps, it was used to produce petroleum. You probably heard about Paraffin Young, James Young. Well, he was the first man that promoted the shale around this area. When the shale is brought up to the surface, it goes through a crusher, it's heated up, and then it's crushed. And when you look at the bings, what you're actually seeing is the waste product. Oakbank Bing, that's the one south of the Lizzie Bryce. They actually ran a train siding into there to take that bing away. It was taken to some of the towns on the west coast, I think. But the M8, the sections from Newbridge roundabout, they were built from shale, the Lothian bings. They were taken from that. It's a good thing they kept the Westwood bings. It's a monument to the shale industry, and it was a big thing here at one time, the shale industry. As far as the town goes, I think they've combined the country and the town. They've done it quite well in Livingston. It's a nice location, the almond running through, things like that. You're on the verge, handy for Edinburgh. So it's a nice area. I must say that. I stayed here for 30 years and I was reluctant to leave.
I'm Robin Chesters, I'm Director of the Almond Valley Heritage Centre. I've been here since 1989 looking after the museum and the mill farm. The NewTown is there because there isn't any mining underneath it. There's a big lump of volcanic rock where all the shale was destroyed. Where the shale does occur is around the periphery, the old town of Livingston Station, and also in the south of Livingston, Dedridge as well. It all stems from James Paraffin Young, the great Victorian hero, who discovered you could extract oil from a special kind of coal which you found in Bathgate. He set up his works there, and he was the first man to find a process that was commercially viable to create a burning oil you can put on lamps and bring light into everybody's home. That didn't last for terribly long, but thereafter they discovered this oil shale, which is a different sort of mineral, but in a very similar sort of geographical position. And certainly in terms of shale and other non-conventional hydrocarbons, West Lothian was always a centre of excellence. People would pick up a rock in South Africa and wonder whether it was any good, send it through to Pumperston, they would test it and they would tell you. The site of the NewTown was one of the few places where you didn't have mine workings underneath, so you had no problems about foundation, but also you had this huge skilled workforce that were putting out of a job and would have to emigrate or move elsewhere. So there's a tremendous engineering expertise, a chemical expertise, all of the great ingredients that you'd want if you were building a new area of industry in a new town. So the shale mines sort of gradually wound down during the 1950s. People had to travel a long way by company bus from one site to another and sort of chasing a dying industry, if you like. And I think having the new town here brought a whole new set of opportunities. The great folks who are here to create the new town, to control it, wanted to sort of tap into the spirit of enterprise of the old shale oil industry. So a lot of their promotional things during the 70s and 80s were tapping into the wonderful advances they made in Victorian times to inspire modern industries or whatever. And I think our museum was part of that. So the Development Corporation encouraged that collection of heritage as a reminder of some continuity, but also to give that sense of community, that people are actually coming in and being part of a continuity of history.
My name is Maureen Liddell. I first came to Livingston in 1980, and until recently I've been working as a museums assistant for West Lothian Council. We're 3 generations down the line now, and there are a whole group of people who can't imagine living anywhere else other than Livingston. Their grannies or even their great grannies might have come here, but their mums were born here and they were born here, and this is their community. And in fact, an awful lot of the children, we recently did a project in some of the schools talking about the establishment of Livingston NewTown, and a lot of the children were surprised to find out it was a new town. And I mean, I had to show them maps of the area in the 1950s and say, look, there's nothing there. Okay, Howden Park is there, Mill Farm is there, but in between it's fields. And they were really quite surprised because it's always been there as far as they're concerned, and it's their town and it's where they come from. Well, people I've spoken to who came in the very early days of Livingston said that, I mean, they had the community houses and they had the clubs and they had forum where people, the community, could get together to discuss how things were going. But there were still some things missing. One lady told me her father complained that in his very first New Year's Eve in Livingston, nobody came to the door. And he'd come from Glasgow, and he said the streets were always busy and people were going house to house. And he found that really difficult to deal with. It just wasn't what he was used to. There was something missing. All these things were there, but it still takes time for people to build up relationships with others. You have to grow into a community, I think, rather than it just suddenly appearing out of thin air. But at the same time, they wanted to document the growth of the new community within Livingston, the different areas, and how things began to grow, like gala days. Each area began to have its own gala day every year, and as the schools grew up, the gala days, all sort of formed around them, and it was creating a sense of identity. Gala Day had been very much a West Lothian tradition. All the local towns and villages had them anyway, so it developed in Livingston as well. But it was a much bigger town, so each area had its own little gala day, I suppose. But it was all part of, becoming West Lothian, I suppose, another town in West Lothian, and it was going to have some of the same things that the other towns already had in West Lothian. All the components of a community are now here in Livingston. It's a bit different from other communities. Other people have noted that we don't have a main shopping street. We have a town centre which is indoors. And somebody once said to me, it's really strange, all the houses have their backs to the roads rather than looking out onto roads. But apart from that, I think it is now a group of communities. Each area has its own sense of identity and we all belong to Livingston.
I was born in Edinburgh, born and brought up in Edinburgh. My wife, Idina, we met in Edinburgh. We were at, believe it or not, we were at the same secondary together. We were at the same school together, and we got together after it.
We married in Edinburgh. But we never really got sort of settled in any one place.
No, we were moving from one place to another.
Yeah, because Dave's mum and dad, they moved out following Dave's older brother to Livingston. And they let us know that it's a good place, come out and visit. And we fell in love with the place.
We just took one look at the flat that we were getting and we thought, this is it.
When we were up at Craigshill, we had our daughter, but we have our son as well in Dedridge. And they've both grown and had their own children here. My daughter actually stays in Howden, and she has a daughter. who now she's in her mid-20s, and my son, he has a young son, and he had married a Polish lassie who also had a daughter already. And we've just found out that we're going to be great-grandparents.
So basically, our whole family literally has grown up in and around Livingston, and it's been, for us, it's been a good move, because when we got the house from the LDC, we got the chance to buy it on this government thing that you could.
That's right.
And you got a discount on the house, so we automatically put into the LDC to buy the house because we loved it so much. In fact, we still do. And that's where we put our roots down, and that's where we've stayed. And
we've made a lot of friends here.
Yeah.
And I mean, when we first were in the house and the new neighbours and people were moving in, it was a very sort of community spirit. Yeah. I mean, one winter we had a really bad winter, and of course all the cars were all snowed in the square and that, and all the neighbours were out, all of them to dig
clear the road with the snow. So over the years, the older people like us have moved out, and the younger people have moved in. It's not got the same atmosphere now as it did, but they're still friendly enough.
But having said that, I mean, our children have childhood friends that they went to school with, and they're still very, very close with them.
Simply because they went to Dedridge Primary School together, and then James Young Secondary School together, so they've all grown up and they all know one another.
Stayed friends, yeah.
They've stayed friends for 40 years. We've been all over the country, not moving in the past. We've been camping and caravanning and stuff like that, but our heart has always been in Livingston, 100%. It's always just been, it's the place for us.
Yeah.
So my name's Gail Adams, and I will be 60 this year. And I moved to Livingston with my family at the age of 8, and that involved my mum, my dad, and at the time my 3 sisters, and then along came another sister. So I'm the eldest of 5 girls. My dad, he actually was lucky enough to work with the LDC as a construction officer in the Dedridge area of Livingston. So we upsticks from a flat where we were all crammed in Dundee, and we came to Livingston, and we got a lovely house, a brand new house, which was empty, and we all ran around it, had great fun from day one, and I can remember the echoes inside the house, and there was absolutely nothing round about us. It was an open space outside, and we were brought up there, and my mum is still in that house to this day. At the age when I moved, and with my sisters being the age they were, Livingston had everything to offer. A job for my dad, things for my mum to do. She got very much involved in the community side of things as well. My dad, he was a community officer, and he was a youth wing leader at Toronto Youth Wing. And he took everybody swimming and took people, the boys playing football, and he was very well thought of. But unfortunately, my dad actually passed away when I was very young, at the age of 12. But everything that he had encouraged us to do, we carried on, through our young lives in Livingston. And I then went on to encourage my family to do the same. And all the original things that were put in place, the people at the time, things like the farm cafe down at Craig's Hill, John Hoy was, he was the man at the time, and that has gone on from strength to strength. St Paul's Church, the Baptist Church, just all the local places for people to meet. The town was built for that purpose, for people to enjoy, what there was on offer, and it's just grown and grown through time. I certainly don't even touch the sides of the town now, whereas I remembered every, inch of the town. So definitely it has, done what it said it would. It's grown and grown, and everybody has benefited from that. And people not only have stayed around, their children have been brought up, their grandchildren have been brought up in Livingston. And I think even if you do leave at any time, you come back for the right reasons.
Well, my name's Colin Williamson. I'm a 56-year-old storyteller, civil celebrant, public speaker and kind of raconteur. I was in a state of shock when I came here because I thought, where's the heart? Where's the main street? All the buildings look the same. Moving to Livingston was the nearest thing to immigration without leaving these shores. My dad was involved in St Paul's Church in Ladywell. He was an elder in the church, and Jim Maitland was the founding father of the Livingston Ecumenical Experiment. So Jim was a great economist and also a great Christian socialist. He had a great feel and a great love of the underdog, and he was passionate about trying to build a sense of community and trying to help. At several key points in my young life, Jim appeared. Many years later, when I was in my 30s, I had a difficult spell. I had a spell of quite bad depression, and you'd have this amazing lunch that him and his wife used to prepare, Elizabeth, this incredible lunch, soup and homemade bread, and in his house in Leving Place. And one day I went for this marvellous dinner, but Jim had planned it all because he was clever. And after the dinner, I didn't realise this, but he said, I think you could be of great use. We need to, at the Craig's Farm. I said, the Craig's Farm, that's where John Hoy, he's the manager. Oh yes, I've spoken to John, and he would love to have you as a volunteer. But working with John at the farm, and John was a pioneer, and he'd built the farm up, and so had Jim, from a series of ruined buildings in the 60s to this fine community complex in Craigshill, and I volunteered with John for 3 years. John used to say, come in, he was a Glasgow man, he didn't have any formal qualifications, he was a shop steward, a local Labour councillor. John used to say, don't come near me and moan about your community, and moan about the weather, and moan about its problems, unless you're prepared to give 5 or 10 minutes of your time to addressing these problems, then come near me. That was John. Don't come near me. I've no time to be dealing with barstool politicians, he used to say. Well, during lockdown, my storytelling, civil celebrancy and public speaking just disappeared because I need audiences, and it just collapsed. And my wee brother and I were sitting in my mum's house, and he was kind of worried about me. So he picked up his phone and he said, because he's a season ticket holder at Livy, look what, have you seen this call? I said, what's that ad? He said, it's an advert we're looking for a volunteer disability access officer. And I looked at the job description, and because I'm dyslexic, I thought, nah, no danger. These job specs, they look like a sort of Bill of Rights to me. He persuaded me I phoned the club secretary, Derek White, and he agreed to meet me. And once I told him about my autism, I'd been diagnosed with autism when I was 47, and I'd had a lot of involvement. I've got a passion for disability rights and disability equality. I'm a motivational speaker. I go and speak about my journey to increase awareness of the condition, the hidden differences I have. I'm passionate about early intervention and recognition for children. I don't want kids to go through what I went through, and I'm passionate about making a difference. So when I told Derek this, he said, well, we'd like to give you the post, so we'd like to take you on. For the first time since I came here, all those years ago as a kid, right, in 77, we've got something to identify with now as a town. These are the club and these guys, brought 5 districts, disparate districts or villages together. So I would say that the club has been integral to giving Livingston its first sense of giving it real town-wide identity. The club to me doesn't just embody the town, but the role I've got, just fits with me, fits nicely because, I'm doing something I feel like I'm doing something constructive to perhaps help disabled supporters. Without these guys, without my parents, and with men like Raymond and John and Jim and Margaret and Frank, wee Jane, I wouldn't be sitting here, telling you the story, that's for certain. Because now, they rubbed off on me, I've been influenced by all these people. And I now love Livingston, I now want it to be a better town.
50 years ago, in 1972, I graduated from Murray House as a teacher. I went to Midlothian County Council and to see if they had a job. He got me an interview in Livingston, NewTown. Amond Bank was next to the Mall, which was the centre of the earth at that time. It was the shops, and next to it was the health centre. I worked very hard. It's very hard to have 33 people at the same time, but it was my privilege. I can honestly say that, to be part of their lives was my privilege. I was there for 23 years until I got invalided out. I had been ill and I was told to give it up then. By then I had taught a couple of children that were children of my children. After many years, I still kept up with some. I had actually done geography and religion as my main academic subjects, so it was wonderful to me when I got children in from the Middle East and the Far East. Their fathers were PhD students who got houses in Livingston, just the same as Edinburgh and Glasgow Overspill did. So we studied the religions and we became acquainted with each other. We were very cosy about it. It was very good. Right away, as soon as I started teaching, I realised that the mums were lonely. They didn't have a backup of family because they had come mainly from Glasgow and Edinburgh, so the teacher was their pal. And we had that child in common, so it meant a lot to us and it lasted. Fairly recently, a couple of years ago, a boy shouted to me. Now that boy was over 50, but I still can't help calling them son. He shouted to me, "Mrs. Millen, I've still got my Misha Bear badge that you brought from the Moscow Olympics." And that was in 1980 that happened. I love bumping into any of them or hearing anything about them. I really appreciate being part of these children's lives. I know at the time it was very hard work. It was hard work when you were there with 33 who behaved in different ways, and it was hard work at home preparing stuff. But I can honestly say it was my privilege to be part of their lives. And we were lucky to be in the NewTown.
Hello, my name's Karen Stewart. I moved to Livingston when I was 8-year-old in 1966 when the town was obviously just a few years old. I can remember coming home from school one afternoon and Mum and Dad being quite happy saying, "Look, your dad's got a new job in Livingston and we're going to have to move to a brand new house." And my first thought was, as an 8-year-old, all my friends at school, I'll probably miss them. And I think my mum and dad, they moved one day while my sister and I stayed overnight with my grandma in Edinburgh to get out of the way. So the next day, moved out to the house, opened up the door, and I can just remember the smell of the lovely new paint, the wooden floorboards, just everything looking, pristine condition. And Mum said, "Right, go upstairs and I'll show you the bedroom." So upstairs. So I had the second biggest bedroom. It was really nice. And she had it all set out with obviously things that were maybe not brand new, but got from other relatives. So the first night they said, "Right, go and take a bath." and that was a novelty, a proper bath we had. So sitting there, and one memory I had, we were turning the taps on, and the water was all that sort of like brown. I thought, oh, what's this? And said, oh, it's all okay, just natural, you've got to wait for the water to come through. So I can remember writing a letter to my friend in Edinburgh, sort of saying, I'm sitting in a bath, it's like chocolate pudding bath. So I think that was one of the sort of the memories I had of first, so like the cleanliness and just the smell of everything. I mean, even like my first day at primary school, I'd been quite nervous about going in, and I sat at a table with 4 others, and there was like, 2 boys and a girl. And in fact, to this day, that same girl is still one of my friends who was still, meet up with her. Because our school in Edinburgh was a very sort of strict, old-fashioned school, and everything was sort of segregated. Each girls had their own entrance, boys had their own playground, and we never really met up with boys and girls at all, apart from the class. And again in Edinburgh School, we all sat in our own desks, but in rows. Whereas walking into Livingston, we're all together. Just more, we could speak to each other during the day, just not as strict. Well, I suppose Edinburgh, being a big place, you never got to know many people, but my dad certainly, he got involved a lot. He was the one that used to sort of set up the Livingston Rugby Club, and he used to always like history, and he was always asking his grandparents, what happened when you were wee, tell us about all the times. And he used to always say, I just wish that his own grandparents had written something down. And I think it was after my mum died that he had time in his hands. He thought, right, I will write down something. And then the book that he wrote, he actually, commemorated it to his own grandchildren at the time, and to us too, that when they grew up, he would be around, so he needed somebody to ask questions from, and all the answers he would get from looking at the book. And the book was actually called From Leith to Livingston. So he wrote about all his time in Leith when he was a boy up till he got married, and then the very end of the book was all about his time in Livingston.
Well, I don't think I probably would have ever stayed in Livingston at first, compared to the Borders where I was brought up. But because my late husband's work was here, I just came, and now I wouldn't move away because I've got everything here, my hobbies, I do art, I do pottery. And the bowling was a big thing in my life because as I became a Scottish internationalist and capped, that was big for me. Well, what happened was, at the Dean's Old High School, they used to have those adult children classes. And the girl there, the teacher, had a jewellery class, and it was a morning class. I had a photograph and I've lost it, and all those were earrings and necklaces, the whole lot were made up in the art class at Dean's Old High School. That was in my days. You're talking about 30 years ago. And I used to go to the pottery there as well. And used to go in the mornings when the children were there as well. When your children were at school, you could go in the mornings and take part as what they were doing as well, which was really great. The fact that I've lived 87, nearly 88, has done quite a lot for living in Livingston, I would say. Well, it's become big, hasn't it? It's huge now. There was no designer centre or anything like that. When we came, it was all fields. And Craigshill was probably about the first estate that was built down by the Almond. And from there, it just got bigger and bigger. The medical centre's been very good, and I've never had any problems with schooling or my children or anything. They're all straight. There have no problems with any of them. And I would say Livingston is a great place to bring families up.
I'm Katie Omond, and I moved to Livingston in 1971. And I worked for Hewlett-Packard and was in California just about the time the big skateboard craze came about, and I thought wow, this is exactly what Livingston needs. And at the time, this was the late 70s, so every kid had a skateboard, and it was a big craze at the time. You could buy a skateboard anywhere, and the chemist, the butcher, just about everybody wanted a piece of the action. So we sort of kind of started making skateboards, and Livingston, being Livingston, and an average age of about 24, there was lots of kids about, so we started the Livingston Skate Cats, as it was, with all the young kids. And then Ian Urquhart, who was an architect on the Livingston Development Corporation, and his wife Dee, they sort of became involved in the Livingston, and decided that what we needed was a skate park. Ian persuaded the Livingston Development Corporation and the Scottish Sports Council to put money in to fund the skate park. And we did start, and it was kind of finished about the late 80s, just when you thought, oh, the skateboard craze was over. This was one of the sort of kind of going to be a white elephant in Livingston, nobody going to use it. But actually what was happening was skateboard, the craze had died, and skateboard, the fanatical extreme sport, emerged. And that very first year, at the opening, we had a visit from some of the top American pros, and the word got around, and we had visits from just about every country in Europe. We had from Italy, Germany, Spain, and it put Livingston on the map, absolutely. You know, people would say, oh, I come from Livingston. Well, that's where the skate park is, isn't it? Yeah. And just by almost serendipity, the skate park was situated slap bang in the middle of Livingston, which didn't actually belong to any particular sector of Livingston. It didn't belong to Ladywell, Craigshill or Howden, so it was a kind of neutral territory for all the kids. So as you can see, here we go, some 40 odd years later. I've got a lot of the early brigade with Stevie and Mike and Tony Hawk. They're all still skating, you know. Tony Hawk's been to Livy as well, you know, so that was good, you know. And we all skate, and here's me, 80-year-old, still skate a little bit, despite titanium knees. It really inspired on a worldwide scale for the growth of skateboarding, which we know is an Olympic sport. So I think Livingston actually played a very significant part in that development of where skateboarding is circa 2022.
Yeah, my name's Alan Stewart. I am 54 years old, or 54 and a half years old. I was born in 1967, October 1967. I believe for my sins I'm one of the first 20th children to be born in the NewTown. Yeah, so I believe it was 1976, Almondvale Centre opened up in Livingston. It was prior to that, we had a shopping centre in Craigshill called The Mall, which is still there, which consisted of quite a few shops. But it was a big thing for the NewTown when Livingston Centre opened up. And I went up to the centre with my dad, my mum and my two sisters, and I can remember getting given balloons. It was a big thing. And the Livingston Centre, or the centre as we referred to it as back then, the centre became the focal point of the town, because there's no town centre as such in Livingston. The centre became the real place to kind of hang out. It was great. And then in 1983, when I was about 15 and a half, my mum and dad are like, right, I think you better go and get a job and start giving us some money. Or my dad worked with a guy whose wife was one of the managers at what was, it was called Woolco, which it was basically the superstore version of Woolworths. Now, this store, quite simply, was the best store ever. It sold everything. It had a clothes department, it had food, it had electrical, it had furniture, it had sports. But anyway, I had an interview up at Wilco, and I started as a trolley boy, which is exactly what it says in the tin. My job was to collect shopping trolleys. It was my first job. I made a lot of friends there, guys who I'm still friends with today. It was a wonderful time. I mean, I think the 80s was a great time to be alive. I personally think that the music was awesome. I mean, punk came along and it just kind of strangled rock and roll, and and it really got a hold. Whilst I wasn't a punk, I did like the music. I was more into like ska music, Madness, Bad Manners, Specials. You would hang about to like play parks, or I say you'd go up to the centre, or you'd go to the chip shop. About 11 o'clock you would go to Melville's, which was the local nightclub. On a Wednesday they had what was called Boppers Night, and it was basically up to 15 years old. You used to go along and you would be dancing the old Duran Duran and Spandau Ballet, and if you were lucky you got a slow dance with some girl that you fancied. It was a great place. I've lived in Livingston all my life, and I think it's a wonderful town. It really is.
My name is Kachi Okori, and I've lived in Livingston since 2006. My husband got a place to do his master's at Hereford University back in 2004, and I joined him in 2006. He was already in Livingston because he was schooling in Edinburgh, and his friends told him, oh, Livingston is such a cool place to live in, and his friends were already living in Livingston at the time, so it made sense for him to live in Livingston. And by the time I joined him, I came straight to Livingston. Unlike what other immigrants normally do, people would go to London first and then move to somewhere else later on. But I came straight to Livingston, so Livingston was the very first time. Livingston was the first place I came to when I came to the UK. And apart from the initial shock, initial weather, because I came during winter, I didn't expect how cold it was going to be. But apart from that, I felt like it was such a quiet place and very well connected, with good train lines to the major cities like Edinburgh and Glasgow. So we decided to stay back and raise our children in Livingston. So we have 3 children born in Livingston, and they were all born at St. John's Hospital. Our kids go to school in Livingston, where they've made friends, they've made lifelong friends. These are children they were born, they grew up with, went to the same nursery as. And this is why every time we've talked about moving away from Livingston, our children have said, no, we're not going anywhere. This is the only way. And for example, when my oldest child tells me, oh, I've lived here all my life, you may think, oh, but you're only 14. But when you think, really, she has lived here all her life. And although our children are Scottish, they're born to Nigerian parents, but we feel they're fully integrated into the local society. They're fully integrated into Livingston. So we try to still make sure they're aware of the heritage of where they come from, which is why we've given them Nigerian names. And we give them Nigerian food like eba and jollof rice. We give them all those things. So it's all part of who we are, where we're coming from, the food we grew up eating back home in Nigeria. It's really important that my children eat the same thing. Apart from having a nice community here, we have also a very nice Nigerian community, an African community, and our children are also interacting with people from that community, people who are immigrants themselves, people who are raising up children in this culture, and people who probably have the same experience, the same struggles as we do, being brought up in one culture and trying to raise our children in a different culture. So yeah, it's all important. It's very important to us that children grow up in these communities.
I'm Cameron Glasgow, I'm 21 and I was born and brought up in Livingston, and I still live here today. I think Livingston is pretty unique in the way it is as a new town in the countryside, and it was something that I really enjoyed was being able to go down to the pond in Dedridge or out to Amondale and exploring and seeing wildlife that if you were to grow up in Glasgow or Edinburgh, you don't necessarily get as easy. And as someone who doesn't drive, a lot of my time is spent on a bike or walking. And you get to go down these paths and get to see bits of the town that you don't get to see through a car window. And that's really what has made me so attached to Livingston, is the different side of Livingston that most people see, and then the side of Livingston that people see who actually live here and spend every day here. And it's something that I really appreciate about the town. Whilst I was in college, I was doing the typical young person thing of working 0-hour contract hospitality job. And at one point I was doing 2 at once. And then I got involved in something I'm interested in politics, and took on a role in the Scottish Parliament, which is where I am now, working for an MSP. And I think it's unique to have a young voice in Scottish politics, but also in Livingston, where we have generally an older population in politics who have been there for a while. And I think it's quite refreshing to hear from other young people. Yeah, so staying here and being able to build a family and get pets and all the normal stuff is exactly what I would want to do, and I can't think of anywhere else I would want to do it but in Livingston, because we're so close to family, friends, and where we grew up. And it'd be great to be able to share that experience as a young couple and with friends and whatever happens in the future. And because Livingston realistically is home for us. 60 years ago, it was a new town built for new families in Edinburgh, younger families moving out of the city and into their own home. And it's very much happening again now, where we're the youngest town in Scotland, and going into 60 years, that's sort of the exact full sort of loop that I think when the new towns were built, this is what was meant to happen. This is the plan all along. So we now have the opportunity to build a new chapter for Livingston. And it's something that I want to be a part of. And Livingston, I feel, is somewhere that I'm so connected to. And if I can't change the world, I would love to just be able to change Livingston and make it better for the people that are going to come after me.
Happy 60th birthday, Livingston, the birth of the new town. A lovely, successful town it is too. But 60 years ago, the village people were worried, it's true, because folks in the village didn't like anything new. But we had to stay grounded, and our fears unfounded. We knew that progress had to go ahead, and I love this town, it has to be said. The story of my childhood, I must let you know. Born at 31 Glen Road, 1951, in a miner's row. The village then was Livingston Station, and memories of childhood, they just fill me with elation. The people then were very close-knit, the men working together down the shale pit. The miners' rows have gone, part of the community, a village very much of closeness and great unity. Grandparents and parents are no longer here, but always in our hearts and always held dear. A community that really looked after its own, and now a new town, and it certainly has grown. The original school is still standing, but not the original hall. It held many a function, and we all had a ball. Gala days, running our races, stuffing our faces with the gallery bags, then up to the hall, ready to go dancing in our best glad rags. The shale bing at the back of the old hall, it's long gone, but the bowling green's still there with its immaculate lawn. The co-op's still there, known as the store, but the original post office, alas, no more. The church is the same, still Sunday morning chimes. Memories are good, but we must move with the times. Dean's is now the area, not Livingston Station. The Livingston NewTown is a credit to the nation. The wee village is gone, but childhood memories remain. The Riz is still here, so is the Glen Burn. Going in the water, we all took our turn. The Big Wood, the Giant's Belly, that was our playground. We didn't need the telly. Seems no time since I was 11 years old, Time really does fly, as we are always told. 60 years on and I'm growing old, but memories are precious, more precious than gold. It's lovely to know Livingston is having a 60th celebration, and the town has turned out to be a wonderful creation. I've lived my life in a place now filled with nostalgia. But at my age now, I also have arthritis and neuralgia. But up until now, I've lived the loveliest of lives. Now a mother, a grandmother, and a very happy wife. And when the bell tolls, and it tolls for me, I wish to walk down Glen Road just one last time. And I hope I can see Gran and Grandpa Pender waiting for me. Happy 60th anniversary, Livingston.